Hello everyone. Today we look at CAT 2019 Slot 2, Section 1 VARC, one of the passages that had come in the reading comprehension section. I'll be reading out the passage first, and then we will understand the passage with respect to specific words and the gist that it gives. Around the world, capital cities are disgorging bureaucrats. In the post-colonial fervor of the 20th century, coastal capitals picked by trade-focused empires were spurned for regionally neutral ones. But decamping wholesale is costly and unpopular. Governments these days prefer piecemeal dispersal. The trend reflects how the world has changed. In past eras, when information traveled at a snail's pace, civil servants had to cluster together. But now, desk workers can ping emails and video chat around the world. Travel for face-to-face meetings may be unavoidable, but transport links too have improved. Proponents of moving civil servants around promise countless benefits. It disperses the risk that a terrorist attack or natural disaster will cripple an entire government. Wongs in the sticks will be inspired by new ideas that walled-off capitals cannot conjure up. Autonomous regulators perform best far from the pressure and lobbying of the big city. Some even hail a cure for ascendant cynicism and populism. The unloved bureaucrats of faraway capitals will become as popular as firefighters once they mix with regular folk. Beyond these sunny visions, dispersing central government functions usually has three specific aims: to improve the lives of both civil servants and those living in clogged capitals, to save money, and to redress regional imbalances. The trouble is that these goals are not always realized. The first aim, improving living conditions, has a long pedigree. After the Second World War, Britain moved thousands of civil servants to agreeable English country towns as London was rebuilt. But swapping the capital for somewhere smaller is not always agreeable. Attrition rates can exceed 80%. The second reason to pack bureaucrats off is to save money. Office space costs far more in capitals. Agencies that are moved elsewhere can often recruit better workers on lower salaries than in capitals, where well-paying multinationals mop up talent. The third reason to shift is to rebalance regional inequality. Norway treats federal jobs as a resource every region deserves to enjoy, like profits from oil. Where government jobs go, private ones follow. Sometimes the aim is to fulfill the potential of a country's second-tier cities. Unlike poor, remote places, bigger cities can make the most of relocated government agencies, linking them to local universities and businesses and supplying a better educated workforce. The decision in 1946 to set up America's Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta rather than Washington, D.C., has transformed the city into a hub for health research sector and business. The dilemma is obvious. Pick small, poor towns and areas of high unemployment, get new jobs. But it is hard to attract the most qualified workers. Opt for larger cities with infrastructure and better qualified residents, and the country's most deprived areas see little benefit. Others contend that decentralization begets corruption by making government agencies less accountable. A study in America found that state government corruption is worse when the state capital is isolated. Journalists who tend to live in the bigger cities become less watchful of those in power. This is where the passage ends. Now let's look at some of the words that came in this particular passage and see if we can, from the context, understand these words. Disgorging bureaucrats would mean pouring out or removing. Bureaucrats are, of course, those who are involved in government jobs. Fervor is an intense feeling. Spurned is rejected. Regionally neutral is in double quotation marks, and this would mean that the governments that came into power after the colonial empires, they rejected coastal capitals and made their capitals regionally neutral. Piecemeal dispersal would mean part by part spreading. Proponents, those who are in favor of or believe, or those who believe in a certain course of action. Disperses is, of course, spreads out. Cripple is to bring something to a standstill, to make movement difficult. Wongs would mean studious people. In the sticks is slang for countryside. Walled off is separated by a wall. Conjure up is to be able to bring up, okay, or sort of, from magically from thin air, bring into existence something. Autonomous, those who can work independently. Hail, call for. Ascendant, rising. Cynicism, a mistrust in human nature, believing that people are motivated by self-interest and self-interest alone. Populism would mean appealing to the majority of the common people. Clogged would mean very populated and polluted also. Redress is would mean to set right. Pedigree here would mean a long history. Okay, it has a precedent. Attrition would mean those who leave bureaucratic jobs. So attrition rates is the rate of leaving these jobs. Federal jobs are, of course, government jobs, bureaucratic in nature. Hub is a center out here. Dilemma is, of course, a situation where you have to make a choice out of two tough choices. Contend is put forward a proposition, okay, or believe that. Begets would mean bring about out here. So these are some of the tough words that came in this particular passage. Now let's look at the passage paragraph by paragraph. So what is the first paragraph trying to say? The first paragraph is basically trying to say that governments are pouring out bureaucrats from the capital cities. They're preferring a stage by stage dispersal, and the trend reflects how the world has changed. Before, the world could not afford this because there wasn't technology as much. So there was snail mail and people had to cluster together. But now, because of probably because of informational technology and computers, there has been this is something that one can afford. Transport links are also better. The second paragraph talks about how those who are in favor of moving civil servants around promise a lot of benefits. They say it disperses risk. They say that uh, people can be inspired by new ideas. They say that there can be better performance when you're away from the pressures of a big city. Some even talk about a cure for the rising cynicism that is there and populism that is there by bureaucrats or practiced by bureaucrats in the bigger cities. They also say the unloved bureaucrats, once they go to uh, countrysides or smaller towns, will become as popular as firefighters. When you look at the third para, the author says that in the previous para, the proponents have given quite a few sunny visions. But he says that beyond them, the dispersing central government functions has three specific aims. Now, what are they? They are to improve the lives of both civil servants and those living in clock capitals. That's the first. Second is to save money. And third is to set right regional imbalances. The problem, the author says, is that these goals are not always realized even by dispersing central government functions. Now, in the fourth para, uh, the author talks about the first aim, that is improving living conditions, how it has a long history. Okay, but the problem is that it can result in a lot of attrition. He also talks about the second reason where one can save money, and he sort of agrees that that is possible. In the next para, he talks about the third reason, that is to set right regional inequality. Gives an example of Norway and then talks about how, you know, uh, the bigger cities, okay, can make, though they can make most of the relocated government agencies, linking them to local universities and businesses, uh, the poor remote places can sort of become a hub because it can spur a lot of associated businesses or work. And in the next para, the author says, so governments all over the world have a dilemma. Now, what is that dilemma? If you pick if you take bureaucratic jobs to small poor towns, there are areas which will get new jobs, but it is hard to attract the most qualified workers. On the other hand, if you opt for larger cities with infrastructure and better qualified residents, the deprived areas of the country will see very less benefit. So this is the dilemma. Do we keep those in those should we pick small poor towns to spread the bureaucratic jobs, or should we keep it in the bigger cities? Then the author goes on to say that a few others put forward the proposition or assert that spreading bureaucratic jobs brings about corruption. It does so by making government agencies less accountable. He quotes a study, talks about a study, and he says that according to the study, state government corruption is worse when the state capital is isolated, especially because journalists who tend to live in the bigger cities become less watchful of those in power. This is a paragraph by paragraph understanding of the passage. But if you go and try to put this entire passage in a few words, you would say that the discussion about this passage is about capital cities pouring out bureaucrats. And by that, we mean the author discusses whether it is a good idea or not. He talks about those who are in favor and their sunny visions. He talks about three specific aims: He says how it is difficult to realize those aims. And then he finally comes to the dilemma that should we keep them in the larger cities or pick smaller towns. And then he goes about to say that corruption can become more if bureaucratic jobs are decentralized, quotes a study, and that's where the passage given to us ends. So it is something that from this data and this crunching that we have to make sense of what is given and try to answer the questions that are put in front of us. Now let us look at the first question that this passage throws in front of us. The passage question 1 reads, the long pedigree of the aim to shift civil servants to improve their living standards implies that this move, and then we have to uh, complete this particular idea. Now if you go back to the passage in the fourth para, the author talks about the long pedigree. So he says the first aim, improving living conditions, has a long pedigree, which in this context means has a precedent, has a history. And he gives an example also. After the Second World War, Britain moved thousands of civil servants to agreeable English country towns as London was rebuilt. Now let's go back to the question. So the long pedigree of the aim to shift civil servants to improve their living standards implies that this move, now let's look at the options, is supported by politicians and the ruling elites. That we do not know. There is no particular data to support that. So one is out. Let's look at 2. Is not a new idea and has been tried in the past. This seems to set correctly because it has a precedent, like I said, and the author also gives an example. So there is a good chance that this could be the answer. Let's look at 3. That this move has become common practice in several countries worldwide. We do not know. We know that it has a precedent. Whether it has become a common practice or not, we do not know. So we can safely eliminate 3. Let's look at the fourth option. Implies that this move takes a long time to achieve its intended outcomes. Again, there is no particular data to tell us that this is the case, so we can safely eliminate 4. We are left with option 2, is not a new idea and has been tried in the past. So I repeat, the long pedigree of the aim to shift civil servants to improve their living standards implies that this move is not a new idea and has been tried in the past. So our answer is option number 2. Let's look at question 2. People who support decentralizing central government functions are least likely to cite which of the following reasons for their view. Which means that there are certain proponents, the passage talks about proponents of decentralizing, and they have certain sunny visions. So in the options, 3 of the options will have reasons which they give for their view. There will be one which they do not give. So that would be our answer. So let's go to the passage first and look at what the proponents have to say. Proponents of moving civil servants around promise countless benefits, disperses the risk, wongs in the sticks will be inspired by new ideas, autonomous regulators perform best far from the pressure and lobbying of the big city, and they also hail it as a cure for ascendant cynicism and populism. making unloved bureaucrats as popular as firefighters. Now let's come back to the question. So, people who support decentralizing central government functions are least likely to cite, to quote, which of the following reasons for their view? Let's look at option 1. Policy makers may benefit from fresh thinking in a new environment. Yes, this could be a reason for their view, because they talk about wongs in the sticks. So wongs are studious people, in the sticks is in the countryside, may come up with fresh ideas. So proponents are likely to talk about this reason for their view. So this is not our answer. Let's look at 2. More independence could be enjoyed by regulatory bodies located away from political centers. Yes, proponents do talk about this as well. They say that autonomous regulators will be able to function better when there is less lobbying and less pressure of the big city. So they are likely to cite this also as a reason. Hence, this is not our answer. We can safely eliminate. Let's look at 3rd. It could weaken the nexus between bureaucrats and media in the capital. Now, it possibly could, but the proponents have not spoken about this in the paragraph given as one of the reasons for their view of decentralizing central government functions. So this is suspect. It could be our answer. Let's look at 4th. It reduces expenses as infrastructure costs and salaries are lower in smaller cities. This also is mentioned by them, that taking people to the smaller cities uh, can be influential in reducing expenses, and hence they are also, it's possible that they would cite this reason for their view. So we can definitely eliminate this. So what remains is option 3, that it could weaken the nexus between bureaucrats and media in the capital. So people who support decentralizing central government functions are least likely to cite the reason it could weaken the nexus between bureaucrats and media in the capital for their view. So our answer becomes option 3. Let's look at question 3, which says, according to the author, so you have to base this answer on what the author has said, relocating government agencies has not always been a success for all of the following reasons, except. So this is an except question, which means that out of the 4 options given to us, 3 of them will be why the author has mentioned that relocating government agencies has not always been a success for. However, there will be one option which the author has not mentioned or may not be a reason. We have to pick this as our answer. So, according to the author, relocating government agencies has not always been a success for all of the following reasons, except, let's look at 1, a rise in pollution levels and congestion in the new locations. Now, nowhere does the author say that a rise in pollution levels and congestion happens in the new locations where government agencies are relocated. And he's definitely not quoted it as a reason for not being a success for this. So there's a very good chance that this could be our answer. Let's look at 2. The difficulty of attracting talented, well-skilled people in more remote areas. Now the author has definitely mentioned about this, He says that relocating government agencies not always been a success because sometimes there's a difficulty in remote areas of attracting talented, well skilled people. So, this is definitely one of the reasons and hence not our answer. Let's look at option 3. Increased avenues of corruption away from the capital city. The author has mentioned this also towards the end of the passage. He says that delinking government agencies from the capitals can make them a prey to corruption. So this is also mentioned by the author as one of the reasons why relocating government agencies not always been a success. Hence, we can safely eliminate this particular option also. Let's look at 4. High staff losses, as people may not be prepared to move to smaller towns. The author mentions about this first up as one of the reasons. He talks about an attrition rate of as high as 80%. So very clearly, this is also one of the reasons that the author mentions why relocating government agencies has not always been a success, and hence we can safely eliminate this option also. So we are left with option 1. According to the author, relocating government agencies has not always been a success for all of the following reasons except a rise in pollution levels and congestion in the new locations. Very clearly, our answer is the first option. We move to question 4. The dilemma mentioned in the passage refers to. So if you remember, towards the end of the passage, the author talks about a particular dilemma. Let's go to that part of the passage. It's out here. He says the dilemma is obvious. Pick small poor towns and areas of high unemployment, get new jobs, but it is hard to attract the most qualified workers. Or opt for larger cities with infrastructure and better qualified residents, and the country's most deprived areas see little benefit. So the dilemma is whether bureaucratic jobs should go to small poor towns or should it go to the larger cities. Now let's come back to the question. The dilemma mentioned in the passage refers to 1. Relocating government agencies to boost growth in remote areas with poor amenities or to relatively larger cities with good amenities. Now this seems to be spot on and there's a very good chance that this is our answer. Let's look at option 2. Keeping government agencies in the largest city. So nowhere does the author talk about the dilemma being with respect to the largest city. We can, at this point itself, we can eliminate this out. If you look at the third option, encouraging private enterprises to relocate, it's not about private enterprises. Here itself we can stop and say that this third option can be safely eliminated. If you look at the fourth option, concentrating on decongesting large cities or focusing on boosting employment in relatively larger cities. This is basically not about decongesting large cities or giving employments in relatively larger cities. So this can also be comfortably eliminated. So the dilemma mentioned in the passage refers to the one mentioned in option 1. Relocating government agencies to boost growth in remote areas with poor amenities or to relatively larger cities with good amenities. So our answer is option 1. We come to question 5 of the passage, which says, according to the passage. So we have to be careful that this is with respect to what the passage is saying. Colonial powers located their capitals. You have to finish this particular idea. Now, if we go back to the passage, the very first line, second sentence says, in the post-colonial fervor of the 20th century, coastal capitals picked by trade-focused empires were spurned for regionally neutral new ones, which means that the colonial powers, referred to here as the empires, chose coastal capitals because they were trade focused. Now let's go back to the question. So, according to the passage, colonial powers located their capitals, one, to promote their trading interests. This seems to be spot on and is probably our answer, but let's also go further. Two, where they had the densest populations. It's possible that those capitals also had the densest population, but it is not written in the passage that they chose or located their capitals because of this. So we can safely eliminate option number 2. Third, to showcase their power and prestige. It's possible that they wanted to showcase their power and prestige, but the passage does not mention that colonial powers located their capitals for this reason. So again, we can safely eliminate option 3. If you look at 4, based on political expediency. Now, expediency means convenient and practical and quick. So, according to the passage, colonial powers located their capitals based on political expediency. Possible, but it's not written in the passage that they did it because of this. It could have been incidental. So, this also can be eliminated safely. So, according to the passage, colonial powers located their capitals to promote their trading interests. That is option number 1. This is, of course, one of the easier questions that we were faced in this particular passage.
Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get notifications of future videos.